Dr. Phil looked at the file in his hands. Standard manila folder. The kind government offices use for everything from tax documents to birth certificates. Nothing unusual about it. His producer had placed it on his desk that morning with a note. "You'll want to read this before the show." He'd skimmed it. Retirement benefits. Pension information. Survivor claims. Routine stuff. The kind of paperwork that fills filing cabinets and HR departments across America. He'd seen 1,000 variations of this. People fighting over inheritance. Families disputing benefits. Nothing he hadn't navigated before, but something about today felt different. 2 families had been invited to the show. Separately. They didn't know each other. Had never met. Lived in different states. Different lives. Different struggles. The Hendersons, Robert, 56, and his wife Linda, 53, had written to the show about a pension dispute. Robert's father had been a steelworker for 38 years. Died 6 months ago. The pension company was refusing to release his benefits. Claiming irregularities. The Hendersons were drowning in legal fees trying to access money that was rightfully theirs. The second family was the Morenos. Daughter Clara, 32, and her grandfather Miguel, 78. Miguel was dying. Stage 4 cancer. Months, maybe weeks left. Clara had written to Dr. Phil desperately seeking help with her grandfather's final wishes. Miguel kept talking about a debt he needed to settle before he died. But he wouldn't explain. Just kept repeating that he'd made a terrible mistake 40 years ago and needed to make it right. 2 unrelated cases. 2 separate segments. That's how the show had been planned, until Dr. Phil actually read the retirement file. The studio audience settled into their seats. The Hendersons sat stage left. Looking tired. Worn down by bureaucracy and grief. The Morenos sat stage right. Clara holding her grandfather's hand. Miguel's breathing labored even in the short walk from backstage to his chair. Neither family looked at the other. Why would they? They were strangers. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage. The applause was warm but routine. Another episode. Another set of problems to untangle. He held the manila folder against his chest. Sat down at his desk. Smiled at both families with practiced warmth. "Robert, Linda," he began. "You've been fighting for 6 months to access your father's pension. The company keeps giving you the runaround. Saying there are discrepancies in his file." "What kind of discrepancies?" Robert leaned forward. "They won't tell us. Just keep saying his employment records don't match their system. But my father worked at that steel mill for 38 years. Never missed a day unless he was in the hospital. There's no discrepancy. They're just trying to avoid paying out." Dr. Phil nodded. Turned to the Morenos. "And Clara, your grandfather has been agitated. Saying he needs to fix something before he dies. But he won't explain what." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He keeps saying he hurt someone. That he took something that wasn't his. But Grandpa has been the most honest man I've ever known. He worked construction his whole life. Lived in the same house for 50 years. I don't understand what he's talking about." Miguel spoke. His voice was weak but clear. Accented. "I was young. Needed work. Needed to feed my family. I did something wrong." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He opened the folder. Looked at the top document. Looked at Robert Henderson. Looked at Miguel Moreno. And something clicked. Something impossible. Something that made his 30 years of experience seem suddenly inadequate for what he was about to say. "Robert, Dr. Phil said carefully. "What was your father's name?" "Thomas. Thomas Henderson. And he worked at Bethlehem Steel in Pennsylvania?" "Yes. From 1976 to 2014. Dr. Phil turned to Miguel. "Mr. Moreno. You worked construction. Where?" "Pennsylvania. Many places. Whatever work I could find." "Did you ever work at Bethlehem Steel?" Miguel's face changed. Went pale. His hand gripped the armrest. Yes. Briefly. 1976. The audience was confused. So were both families. What did this have to do with anything, Dr.? Phil stood up. Walked to the center of the stage. Holding the file. I need to stop for a moment. Because what I'm about to tell you. I didn't see this coming. My producers didn't see this coming. And I don't think either of you did either. He looked at the Hendersons. The reason your father's pension has discrepancies is because according to these records, Thomas Henderson didn't start working at Bethlehem Steel in 1976. Robert shook his head. That's wrong. He definitely did. I remember because I was born that year. He always said I was his good luck charm. Got the job the same week I was born. He did get a job that week, Dr. Phil said. But not under his own name. The studio was frozen. You could hear the ventilation system. Nothing else. Doctor. Phil turned to Miguel. Mr. Moreno. In 1976, you worked at Bethlehem Steel for 3 weeks. Then you disappeared. Never collected your final paycheck. Just vanished. Why? Miguel's breathing was faster now. Clara looked terrified. Grandpa? I had no papers, Miguel whispered. I came here with nothing. My wife was pregnant. We needed money. A man, he said he could get me a job. But I needed documentation. He gave me papers. A social security card. Said it was safe. Said it was temporary. What name was on the card? Dr. Phil asked, though he already knew. Miguel closed his eyes. Thomas Henderson. The Hendersons gasped. Linda grabbed Robert's arm. Robert stood up. That's impossible. That's my father's name. My father's identity. Your father's real name. Dr. Phil said gently. According to his birth certificate, was Thomas Hendrickson. With a K. He changed it legally in 1977. 1 year after he started at the steel mill. 1 year after someone else had been using the name Thomas Henderson, with an E, on employment records. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He gestured to his producer. Stop rolling. Everyone out. Families stay. Producers, give us the room. The crew looked confused but complied. Cameras went dark. The audience murmured. Dr. Phil waited until only he and the two families remained on stage. Then he sat down. Not at his desk. On the edge of the stage. Between both families. Here's what happened, he said quietly. In 1976, Miguel Moreno needed work. Someone sold him fake documents with the name Thomas Henderson. He worked for 3 weeks, realized the risk, and disappeared. He never used those papers again. Never collected his pay. Just vanished to protect his family. Miguel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I was so afraid. I threw the card in a dumpster. Never looked back. But I knew someone with that name might have problems because of me. The real Thomas Hendrickson. Dr. Phil continued. Heard through the mill grapevine that someone had been hired and quit within weeks using the name Henderson. A clerical error in spelling. He went to HR. Instead of reporting the fraud, he saw an opportunity. He legally changed his name from Hendrickson to Henderson. Assumed the employment start date. Gained 3 weeks of seniority he didn't actually work. Robert was shaking his head. My father wouldn't. Your father was young. Ambitious. And 3 weeks of seniority in a union mill meant better shifts, better pay, earlier retirement eligibility. He took advantage of a mistake. And he built his entire career on those stolen 3 weeks. Linda spoke for the first time. But the pension company, why would they care about 3 weeks from 40 years ago? Because pension calculations are based on exact start dates. And when the company audited old files during your claim, they found the discrepancy. Miguel Moreno's brief employment under false papers. Your father's sudden legal name change. The dates didn't match. So they froze everything pending investigation. Clara was holding her grandfather's hand. "You've been carrying this for 40 years. I hurt someone," Miguel said. "I gave them my sin. My lie. And they suffered." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Robert Henderson stood. Walked across the stage. Stood in front of Miguel Moreno. The old man looked up. Expecting anger. Expecting blame, Robert knelt down. "Eye level. Mr. Moreno. You didn't hurt my father. You gave him the foundation of everything good in his life. That job. That career. Everything I had growing up. My education. Our home. All of it came from those 3 weeks you worked." Miguel shook his head. "No. I stole, you survived. You did what you had to do to feed your family. And my father saw an opportunity and took it. That was his choice. His decision. You're not responsible for what he built on that foundation." Clara was crying. Linda was crying. Dr. Phil gestured to the crew. "Turn the cameras back on." The red lights returned. The audience waited in confused silence. Dr. Phil stood. Composed himself. Back in host mode. "What we've just witnessed," he said to the cameras, "is something I've never seen in 30 years of doing this show. 2 families. Connected by an accident of paperwork from 40 years ago. One family seeking benefits from a career built partially on borrowed time. Another family seeking forgiveness for a survival choice made in desperation. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." Dr. Phil turned to Robert. "The pension company has frozen your father's benefits because of these discrepancies. But here's what they don't know. What I'm going to help you tell them. Your father worked 38 years. Real, documented, indisputable years. 3 weeks of seniority that technically weren't his don't negate 38 years of labor. We're going to fight this. And we're going to win." Robert nodded. Unable to speak. Dr. Phil turned to Miguel. "And you? You've been carrying guilt for a choice you made in desperation. A choice that ultimately hurt no one. Thomas Hendrickson made his own decisions about how to use the confusion you accidentally created. That's not your burden," Miguel whispered. "But I broke the law. 40 years ago. For 3 weeks. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. You came here illegally, yes. But you stayed. You worked. You built a life. You raised a family. Clara, your grandfather became a citizen in 1986 through the amnesty program, correct?" Clara nodded. "Yes. He was so proud. Studied for the test for months. Then he's paid his debt. To this country. To society. And definitely to himself." Dr. Phil pulled out a business card. Handed it to Clara. "This is an immigration attorney who specializes in historical cases. If there are any lingering concerns about your grandfather's status, we'll address them. But Miguel Moreno, you are not a criminal. You were a father trying to survive." The audience erupted in applause. But it wasn't the usual applause. It was cathartic. Shared. Like everyone in the room had been holding their breath and finally released it. Dr. Phil did something unusual then. He asked both families to stand. To come together. Center stage. Robert Henderson and Miguel Moreno stood face to face. 40 years ago, Dr. Phil said, a piece of paper accidentally connected you. Today, you get to choose how that connection matters. Not through guilt. Not through debt. But through acknowledgement that we're all just trying to survive. And sometimes our survivals intersect in ways we never intended. Robert extended his hand. Miguel took it. And then, without planning, they embraced. 2 men connected by bureaucracy and circumstance, choosing grace over blame. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Miguel passed away 6 weeks later. But before he did, he watched the episode with his family. watched himself receive the forgiveness he'd been seeking for 40 years. Clara later wrote to Dr. Phil. He died peacefully. Finally free. The Hendersons received their father's full pension 3 months later. They donated the first check, the amount representing those 3 weeks of disputed seniority, to an immigrant support organization. In Miguel's name, the retirement file still exists. But it's no longer about discrepancies. It's about two families who learn that sometimes the paperwork that connects us matters less than how we choose to treat each other when the truth comes out.